we needed to do that. And then I played, then I wrote. And I wrote stuff from a very young age. Starting really, I started writing stories when I was 6 years old. My father took the trouble to get them typed up and share them with friends and so on. And gave me the sense that I could believe in myself as a potential writer. And he's the one who sent off that story that was mentioned by the gentleman who introduced me, that was published when I was just 10 years old. And so in a sense, my dad was my first literary agent as well as guide and mentor. That encouragement has always stood me by good stead. And right throughout school and college, I wrote. And afterwards, that habit had become so deeply entrenched that when I started working life, I even told the UN, look, you know, some people go on weekend hikes or climb mountains or take photographs or collect butterflies. I write, and I hope that's okay with the UN. And they actually gave me written permission. So I would always joke that just as James Bond has a license to kill, I have a license to write. But it also meant that the books in my UN days had a very unusual thing on the dedication, on the copyright page, saying that though the author is an official of the United Nations, none of the opinions expressed by the characters in this book represent those of the United Nations or of the author in an official capacity, which I think is the safest legal disclaimer they could think of for a UN official writing this. But I got away with it. And I'm very proud when you mentioned my sons. One is a very visible and respected foreign affairs writer in the Washington Post after many years at Time magazine. And the other is a magnificently talented fiction writer who is somewhat of a perfectionist. He's only published a couple of stories, but they both won national awards in America. And his first collection of short stories is coming out at the end of this year. Swimmer Among the Stars by Kanishk Tharoor, which I warmly recommend to you because honestly, even though I'm not a neutral, unbiased observer, I can tell you these are amongst the most remarkably impressive stories I've read.
But I actually remember reading one of his non-fiction pieces in the Caravan on Raj Rao, I think, recently.
He writes very well.
Yes. You have a clever knack and penchant for book titles. Of course, the first novel, we all know, the great Indian novel, was a kind of inverted joke in terms of I am writing the great American novel. So when you call the novel the great Indian novel, you'll have all these missiles coming at you. Of course, the clever answer is I'm writing about the great India, Mahabharat. Similarly, when you come to India Shastra, you obviously are topping at the venerable Shastras like the Vashtu Shastra and the Natya Shastra. And in terms of Shastra, it's a set of rules. What made you actually title this particular book this way? Because it's again a grand, ambitious title.
Well, as you say in one of your epigraphs, you know, a man's reach must exceed his grasp for what's a heaven for, the famous poet's lines from the 19th century. But this is, as I said, you know, when I talked about earlier, the three books, India from Midnight to the Millennium, Elephant, Tiger, and Cell Phone, and now this, in a sense they've evolved, and I say this in the introduction to the book, as my personal works of Smriti, memory, Shruti, hearing, and Shastra, thinking, by which I mean the first book looked back on 50 years. So it had to do with, in a sense, a remembrance of India, including from a time before I was born, through times when I was growing up, but not at that point writing about it. So that was the Smriti part. The next book, Elephant, Tiger, the Cell Phone, was about 10 years of events when I was basically living in the United States and not in India, but visiting, of course. So I could argue this is what I was hearing about India and my own reactions to it. And finally comes Shastra, because I'm living through the experiences I'm writing about. In some cases, as in my essay on the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, I myself am a participant in the whole political drama around that issue. So it is my own thinking and reflection. And in that sense, that's what Shastras are all about. They're the products of thinking. Of course, the wise old sages wrote the Shastras, and I'm not a wise old sage yet, but this is a way of coming up with that. To be very honest, my publisher wanted to call it India Sutra. You know, like there were a number of these books, obviously inspired by, it so happens there already is a book called India Sutra, and it's a book about textile industry or something, and we thought we better not be confused with that, and I thought India Shastra might work better.
So talking about youth and youthfulness, how important is age to you? In one of the pieces you've written beautifully about the seemingly inconsequential 50, turning 50 years of age, where you talked